I read a book about George Washington where they said that he had the incredible capacity of remaining silent when it called for him to say something. But then when he said something, everybody listened because he didn't talk like Hamilton and some of the other founding fathers who just blathered on.
Remember, 'tis better to remain silent and be thoughtful than to open your mouth and remove all doubt.
What does that mean? You better say something or they'll think you're stupid. Takes one to know one. Swish.
On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk OLED and large displays, how we need to listen more, and Alexa Plus. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek. This is ResiWeek, episode 473. It'll never stop. Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matty Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week, I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Mr. Jason Knott. He is the resident evangelist over at D-Tools. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to nickname you the minister from now on. Then we've got Ian Bryant. He is the technical manager at IES Communications. How are you, sir?
Doing well. It's awesome to be here as always. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, thank you for being here. All right, gentlemen, we are going to kick this off with a story that comes to us from CE Pro. A report finds that OLED and extra large TVs are currently leading TV sales growth, which shocks no one. It's fueled by a 13% surge in OLED sales and the increasing popularity of extra large screens, as that global market has grown nearly 6% in the fourth quarter of 2024. Jason, let me start with you on this. I don't think anyone's surprised by this. As technology has increased and size has increased, prices have, I'm not going to say come down, but just about anybody can go pick up an OLED these days versus a couple of years ago when it was a luxury item. And the same can be said for those larger screens. Are we seeing anything interesting in these numbers, or is this just to be expected?
You're right. It's not surprising. The one thing that I would be curious to know, and I don't have any data regarding this, but I've heard this anecdotally from quite a few integrators, is the trend of converting dedicated cinema rooms from projector to big screen displays. And obviously that causes all sorts of potential audio issues, but customers want that immediacy, the brightness. I have heard from many integrators who are doing that, and I'd be curious to see how many of these big screen TVs are going into dedicated media rooms. And it's a big opportunity for integrators, because now you've got to come up with an audio solution to go along with these. You don't have a acoustically transparent screen to put the speakers through. You got to really calibrate something nicely from an audio standpoint to go with it if it is in dedicated rooms. But yeah, no, I'm not surprised by the numbers, and it's great news for integrators.
That's fantastic news. I just, out of curiosity, I pulled up our local Best Buy's inventory. And again, this is Canadian dollars, so this is going to be completely out of whack for everybody stateside. But you can get an 86-inch LG for $1,400. Like, it's ridiculous. And in American, that's like $50. Ian, let me come to you. The move to the larger displays, has that increased tension on job sites and in planning meetings between the integrator and the homeowner who wants that bigger display versus the architect and the designer trying to find a place to hide an 86-inch or a 98-inch or potentially something even bigger than that?
Not from what I've been seeing. I think that battle is pretty much over. There's no going back to, oh no, we need a 42-inch in here. We just can't have some large display in this room. It's now moved towards how can we make it the most aesthetically pleasing, how to keep from, having, there's always going to be a fight about putting them above fireplaces because they don't belong there. But in certain rooms, just trying to figure out how to make it blend in and not stand out as much. But a large display in multiple different types of rooms throughout the house is now just so common. The architects and the designers are just going to work with the integrators, what we're seeing on try to figuring out, okay, well, how can we get it as close to that wall as possible so that it doesn't sit out that far? Okay, let's get in a nice big back box to hide everything that's gonna support the weight, and or let's put some framing around it, or there's lots of different options. And I think that also because 5-10 years ago there weren't as many options to then try to make these large displays as concealable and not stand out as much. We just have a lot of more ammunition now to go with, and integrators have gotten so much used to it. They have a lot more experience in dealing with ways of making it more aesthetic, because big TVs are, they're always going to be around, and especially when you have prices like that, there's no way they're going to pop up on every job.
I can tell you from looking at the D-Tools data, just to agree with what Ian was saying, the popularity and the prevalence of the Samsung Frame TV is incredible. And that's a perfect evidence right there is exactly what you're talking about. And I think that product is a godsend for, so many integrators and designers. I'd be curious, Ian, is anybody still talking about like the media decor and the hidden things, or are they just like, hey, let's just put a frame around it and kind of hide it that way?
No, motorization is still big. It's a little bit more difficult when you get into the really extreme sizes, the close to 100-inch and 100-inch plus. The mechanics just require so much more oomph, and you're talking about a lot more metal and a lot more moving parts. But motorization, hiding things through in ceilings and floors, behind paintings is still happening on the mid to the lower large size for sure.
And shameless plug on our end, I'm actually putting together a report based on the data from D-Tools on soundbars, and that the activity in the soundbar category is, I think, directly related to what we're talking about here, both passive and active, primarily active, to be honest with you. But it's huge. And so there's got to be an audio solution that goes with it. So it's, like I said, good news for integrators, both not just from the video side, but the audio side too.
I love the sadness in your voice when you said active primarily. It's great. And everyone picked up on it. All right. Just as the random side note, fun fact for that, there's a 98-inch TV for $2,500. And it's a decent S series TCL, Canadian, which again, it's like $100 for y'all. I should bring one over for you. All right, let's change topics for a second. This comes to us from Residential Systems and a good friend of the show, Mr. Henry Clifford. Are you losing sales to monologuing? It's not always easy to keep your mouth shut and let others do the talking. I love, and as soon as I read the article, I knew this quote would be in here, that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, which is what I'm trying to currently teach 2 out of the 3 kids of mine, that they need to listen a little bit more. But sales managers coach listening 80% of the time and talking 2% of the time. So go read through the article. Henry does a really good point of not only using this from a sales aspect of listening to your customer and understanding what your customer is looking for, rather than talking about it. He also talks a little bit about monologuing in your internal communications with your team, and some ways to try and work on that. I'm starting to wonder if Mitchell sent this article just for me to pay attention to, but I'm going to ignore it completely because that's how I feel about it. Ian, when you read this, I'm conflicted on this, in the sense that, yes, I am 100% guilty of talking too much when I'm dealing with a client. I over-explain things. I am too quick to get into the mud on details and the tech specs of certain things, rather than just saying, yeah, we can do that. But at the same time, I've also sat in multiple meetings listening to someone go on and on and on, again, whether it's sales or internal, with someone talking about something that they just don't understand what we're trying to do. And thus, you got to interrupt to correct that battle. Where's the balance in listening, but also being assertive?
First one, I'll also give a shout out to Henry. This is a great article. But I don't think it's, when we're talking about your customers, well, being assertive, you got to be, it's a very thin line when you're talking about your customers, right? And if they don't quite get it, well, it's like, you don't want to push them too hard. But if you're talking about like a team member, or if it's an internal meeting and you're having a conversation and someone's monologuing and they're just not getting it, I mean, there are tactics that it can be used to try and steer course and direct. But I mean, what I got from this, one of the things that right when I read this, it made me remember the client discovery class that we used to have at CDA Expo, that really helped teach strategy of how to ask the right questions to your customers and just listen to them and listen to everything that they say based off of simple questions that bring really good answers and allow you to find out what they need and how they use technology instead of monologuing and trying to talk to them about how technology is going to work for them in their home. And I thought that was the first thing I thought of. And I from my perspective, I'm very guilty of this as well in my own work of doing the internal monologue. And so I like what he wrote about, especially if you have something that you're going to be presenting and speaking on, is to practice and listen and maybe even record yourself. Find ways to keep it shorter and more direct and more to the point, and then maybe even find a way to spark a response that you are trying to get more directly. So it was a great article, and I think we could all learn from it in all different aspects of our business.
Yeah, it's a great point. Jason, in all your years of kind of covering the industry, being around the industry, I would argue that we're one of the worst industries that I've experienced in, again, like over technifying something. I realize that is not a word, but in just somebody asks you a question about, we talked about this last week with with reference to HDR. Somebody asks you if the TV has HDR, and I'm going to instantly go into all the different aspects of HDR and how they affect what you're viewing and how things are filmed differently, and the different version of HDR they're using for that will display differently depending on which TV you get. Whereas the client just wanted to hear, yeah, it's got it. How do you go about learning to just talk less? As I asked an incredibly long question.
Yeah, I find this article was very insightful. That it reminded me, do you guys remember the Best Buy commercials about 10 or 15 years ago that was bashing the custom industry, where the customer walked in and the boutique shop and they had a parrot and the guy's wearing a turtleneck sweater and he starts talking about, all the different technobabble, and the customer's eyes just glaze over. And then, of course, they cut to the friendly Best Buy person in the blue shirt. Hey, how can we help you? Mm-hmm. And so we are all guilty of that. This reminded me, this is a great article. More so from the customer standpoint, I liked the fact that Henry spun it to talking about internally with your own people, because we've all been in that, where you're in a conference call or a meeting and there's one person who's either interrupting or going on and on. It reminded me of, I read a book about George Washington where they said that he had the incredible capacity of remaining silent when it called for him to say something. But then when he said something, everybody listened, because he didn't talk like Hamilton and some of the other founding fathers who just blathered on. So I think there's a lot to be learned from here. And you didn't mention, Matt, that he mentions this Fathom device that you can put into your conference calls, and after a minute and a half, it gives you a warning that says, "Hey, you've been talking straight for a minute and a half. Shut the heck up."
I didn't want to bring that up because I know Mitchell will get it and put it in my ears, and then I'll have to ignore that as well. Yeah, it's a fantastic article, and I'm just always impressed with what Henry writes. All right, let's change topics again and hit a story that, well, maybe not a story, I guess this is like a press release Coming from Amazon, you may have seen this. They're introducing Alexa Plus, which is the next generation of Alexa. It's powered by generative AI and is planning to be your new personal AI assistant that's smarter, more conversational, and more capable. And it's included with Prime. It is, as I said, nobody's really played with this yet. This is very, very new. It was announced a couple of days ago, but it's going to, as they say, turn talk into action, including one feature that got a lot of excitement across the fields that I saw, where it can do scheduling and instantly add things into your schedule, which is something that most other assistants can't really do well, we'll say. Jason, when you see this is, I don't want to say it's a shot across the bow for the integration community, but it's including a lot of things that some of the products that are specific to our community have kind of hung their hat on. Things like privacy, things like conversational responses, things such as that. Is this something that should concern us, or is this something that we should be able to hopefully take advantage of?
I think from a control standpoint, the battle is being lost very at the pro side for sure. I mean, there was an article I saw just the other day with The Verge where it said, no matter which of the type of control systems you have, and all they mentioned was Apple Home, Google Home, SmartThings, and Alexa. Those are the only four.
Yeah.
Nothing else was mentioned. And so I think that the control, you're swimming against the tide on the control side. It's a tough thing to say, but it's true. From a consumer standpoint, these voice control systems are what people see as the centerpiece of control for the home. Regarding AI, the one thing I'll say is I think I'm a skeptic. A lot of us are skeptics. We always look at technology and we're thinking, okay, is this the next green? Is this the next whatever? This is, from everything I've heard, AI is literally like the internet. It's not going away. It is absolutely going to continue to grow and grow. There might be some backlash for it, but the level of backlash that you might hear today, I think, is going to be swept away in the coming years. I can tell you that it's something that we are looking at and using on a daily basis, and I think a lot of companies are. And I think that any sort of qualms that somebody might have about having AI Alexa in their home is not going to be there a year, 2 years, even 6 months from now. Who knows?
Ian, I'm glad Jason brought up the privacy and the concerns around that with AI and obviously with Alexa in general. Supposedly AI or Alexa Plus is built with privacy and security in mind, which is a direct quote, not an endorsement. Do you think that acceptance that Jason was alluding to, do you think that will come from a place of, peace of mind, or is it just going to be the constant onslaught to where everything you buy in the next 5 years is going to be connected and have some form of AI built into it or peripheral to it, and thus the bombardment is just never going to stop?
It will never stop. The way I see it, when it comes to companies like this making announcements of, pick us because security is our number one concern, and your privacy is at the most. Like, the people that are afraid of their privacy being and their data being shared, they're not going to say, "Oh, Amazon, up until you said that, I didn't think I would ever do this, but now that you said it, I am so sold. I'm buying all your stuff."
That's what sold me.
Right. I don't think those people are going to stay skeptics and stay away from it as much as they can until it's impossible, and then they will be forced to somehow adopt it at some level. What I thought when I read this article was Amazon obviously has a head start from everyone else in the industry because the Alexa devices were some of the first voice control devices that hit the market. They are in the majority of homes over everyone else. There's more Alexa devices out there than any other brand. And now that they have introduced a new level of AI and capabilities that will live on those devices, I don't know. I didn't see how far down the road of the legacy devices it will be supported on. I think gives them an advantage over the rest of the companies that are coming out that are just, that maybe someone may be working on a device that says, oh, we can do Chat GPT on our device natively. Well, it doesn't matter. Now, everyone that has already had their Alexa device is now going to be able to upgrade and have a much more advanced AI experience on their legacy devices. And I'm not 100% afraid that this is causing ripple effects inside of the integrator community when it comes to control. There are hooks for some of devices that we work with, like Lutron, and Crestron has the ability to access the back end of Amazon. And I'm hoping that they're going to leave some of those channels open so that people, when they are communicating with their Alexa through these new algorithms and this new thing, can be having a conversation and say, oh yeah, while we're at it, can you go ahead and turn these lights on? And now those hooks that are already there are just going to be much easier to communicate and express. So I think that there's a chance that it could maybe grow some of the usability. Now, for someone like Josh, I mean, it could cause some issues, because that was one of Josh A's biggest selling point, which was having the ability to have a conversation and talk and have multiple things process at once. So, but they still have their niche. So I'm not 100%. I'm not super concerned, but it's a interesting article. And I unfortunately, AI is definitely, like Jason said, AI is here to stay, and there's not really anything we can do about it, but try to accept it.
Is it surprising to either one of you? And again, this is kind of a weird segue, but is it surprising how far behind Apple is in reference to the AI side?
Apple's always behind. They've been everything that
they're
they've done.
They're non-existent in this conversation at all.
After the first release of the iPhone, everything that they've done on the back end was years behind everyone else. Samsung and some of the other players have always released new, bigger advancements. I mean, Samsung's had foldable devices for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years now? And Apple still has not even entered into that realm, knowing that it's very popular. And I just think that they just wait, and they wait to see what the market really wants. And if it's a fad, it must be a strategy on their part. I've been using the new Apple AI, and it's, it is not where it should be as far as capabilities. So I'm not surprised. It's just kind of what they've been doing over the past decade.
I'm sure that they really appreciate you calling this a strategy, opposed to the failure that I would call it. All right, gentlemen, let's leave it there. Thank you both so much for joining us. Jason, if people want to connect with you, learn more about D-Tools, where can they do that?
They can go to our website. That's d-tools.com. They can follow me on LinkedIn or on Twitter or X at Jason W. Knott.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Ian, if people want to connect with you, learn more about IES Communications, where can they do that?
You can go to iescomm.com. That's iescomm.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, just Ian Bryant.
Excellent. Thank you both. Thank you as well for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at Matt D. Scott on Twitter, X, and pretty much every other social platform, including LinkedIn. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
This is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.